me. It's wonderful to be here today, and thank you to FICO for asking me to host. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Sarah. I'm the Trusts Manager at Bible Society, the only Trusts Manager. I can see we've got people from different organisations in the chat, which is wonderful. Some from teams of fundraisers, some doing things on their own. So yes, I'm part of our wider philanthropy team, but it's just me working on trusts. So yeah, great to have you all here today. I also run an online networking group for trust fundraisers and Christian organisations. That is through LinkedIn, and we meet every other month online. So I'll drop the link to that group in the chat afterwards as well. So I'm delighted to have two of our funders here today, which is wonderful. And we have Dr. John Higgs from the Joseph Rank Trust and Grant Farrant from the Lauderdale Trust. And we've called this Gorilla Funder, which might sound a little bit stressful for John and Grant, but actually what we're all here to do is really work together as fundraisers, as funders, to grow God's kingdom and work to God's glory. So that's just something for us all to bear in mind as we go through today. So I'm going to hand over to John first of all to introduce himself, and then we'll go to Grant to introduce himself, and then we'll get started on the questions. So John, if I can hand over to you first of all, please.
Yes, thank you, Sarah, and thank you to FICO for inviting us to this online session. Our only regret, and I do speak for Grant, is that this is not in person, because it gets really interesting in person. So we're quite happy to do this again and come in person. However, so I'm not going to talk about me. I'm just going to talk about the Joseph Rank Trust. Some of you I can already see on the screen have received funding from us in the past, and some are, I think, receiving funding at the moment. This trust was set up in 1917 to advance the Christian faith and to grow the kingdom of God. So we're kingdom builders. That's our DNA. Our parish is the UK and Ireland. So if your operation or your beneficiaries are outside of that, you're not for us. We do two types of grants: capital grants for church buildings and 3-year core cost grants. In practice, we support all denominations, so we don't have any particular bias towards the established church or the free churches. We're not a repeat funder, so if you've had funding from us before, that's really it, unless, because every lawyer knows, and I'm a lawyer as well, every lawyer knows where there's a law, there's a loophole, and there is a loophole there, but it's only if we come back to you. So generally speaking, we invest into locally embedded mission. Over to you, Grant.
Thank you very much. Grant, my children think it's great that Grant gives out grants. And unlike John, Lauderdale Trust is the new kid on the block. We've only been around since 2021. And prior to that, I've been involved in organisations where income can't be taken for granted, and there was always a desire to spend well and wisely. But coming into funding was actually completely new for me. One of those times where I'm sure many of us have faced this, where you're not looking to change role, but God kind of leads you down a path, and before you know it, you've stepped into a whole new world. And that whole new world is Lauderdale Trust. But because none of the trustees, nor me as the first person being employed, necessarily knew anything about funding, it's actually been a joy to kind of walk that path and go, well, surely the people we're looking to fund, we would meet on a Zoom call to hear about the project firsthand. So it's a joy, actually, as I look at these names, to know some of you have been grilled. I hope it wasn't a grilling, but have been grilled by us when we're trying to understand your project, to hear about it firsthand. There's also names and faces on this call who I know we weren't able to fund. But because we're a new funder, we've been able to kind of navigate how we fund and where we fund. I describe us as a toddler learning to walk. We're just about learning to walk, and we're learning when we get it wrong. We started off as a trust funding anything and everything, global mission, education, training. To be fair, that was the time to get your application in. We funded anything, and we funded pretty much everybody. That was before I became employed and before kind of application numbers soared. And that has led us to also discern, in about 2023, we discerned, where do we want to fund and where is the need? And that seems like an easy thing to ask, but actually quite hard to discern where the gaps are. And we have landed on now, we call it our current focus on our website. We are trying to fund projects that are making Jesus known in areas of deprivation in the UK. That's not to say there's not significant deprivation outside of the UK. It's also not to say there aren't cracking projects making Jesus known in affluent areas of the UK. But we try to go, how can we make the difference in the here and now? As I say, we're a new trust. Equally, we buck the trend a bit. We don't just want to spend the income on our investments. We actually want to spend both the capital and the income probably over the next 10 to 15 years. We're going, the need for Jesus is huge. Let's get on with funding now. Equally, though, trying to get that balance between the longer we retain some of the funds, the more impact we can actually have over time. But trying to strike that balance in an era when, as you know better than me, many trusts are either stopping funding, pausing funding. We're trying to buck the trend of it and come in and go, we're starting funding. And so lots of the things we're doing is about, you know, trying to fund in a slightly different, new way. The size of grants we give, between 10 to 50k for up to 3 years worth of funding. So we've gone, surely multi-year funding is the way to do it, surely larger amounts. Now, not saying we've got that right, but that's where we've tried to kind of hit from the start. At times, it would be a lot easier if we just gave everybody 10k who applies for funding. We don't. We go through process of trying to discern where can we make the biggest impact by partnering with a handful of projects in every round. So we're currently supporting about 60 to 70 projects at any one time. And you know, every quarter, kind of 8 or so projects come off the bus, 8 or so new ones come onto the bus. And I've just seen a comment, where does the trust money come from? It's amazing how few people actually ask me that. And I'm always going, why don't you want to know? Basically, we were gifted a single stock NASDAQ listed IT share. There you go, that's exciting. We were gifted a share holding, which we're gradually, you can't sell off a single shareholding all in one go. We're gradually investing that into UK investment managers. So somebody who had a career in IT and basically went, it's too much to give to any one cause, let's set up our own grant making trust. Just to sneak one final thing in addition to Lauderdale Trust, I actually wear 2 different hats. There is also something called the Lewin Trust, so Lewin Trust. Same source of funds, but a completely separate grant making trust, completely separate trustee board, different financial years. And that trust also receives applications often from Christian organisations, but our focus there is on projects giving children aged 0 to 5 the best start in life. So I spend my time in Lauderdale wanting to know, how are you really making Jesus known in your project? In Lewin, it's often more around how are you making an impact into a child's life. So 2 different trusts were set up at the same time, both only intending to exist for maybe up to 15 years.
Brilliant. Thank you both. It's really interesting to hear of the different approaches of the trusts, and as any good trust fundraiser will know, you need to check your criteria. So it's good to have that sort of outlined for us today. So thank you both for that. I will let everyone know that neither John nor Grant have seen the questions before I ask them. So yeah, we will be very kind and compassionate, as we should be always. But I'm going to start with the questions that we've received. After that, we'll move into a time of open questions where I'll ask you to raise your hand and unmute if you want to ask a question, or pop it in the chat and I'll read it out as well. So first question for you both. What do you think is the key challenge facing funders at the moment? Nice, easy question to start off there. I don't know whether anyone has a preference for going first with that one, or
Yeah, I'll kick off if you don't mind. The key
thanks, John.
challenge, I think the key challenge for this trust is the number of applications that we receive. We do say on our website, and I know you're probably thinking funders hide behind stuff they say on a website, but we can't. No funder can fund every application they receive. So I think my biggest challenge, and I'm the full-time workforce of Joseph Rank, we make about £3 million of grant commitments per annum. We don't have an application form, and we will come and visit you all. So the biggest challenge is applying the filter that the trustees and also the founder's vision. We're very loyal to the founder's vision. So every application that is considered by the trustees is consistent either with the founder's vision or the current interest of the trustees. But we do have, folks, a huge volume of speculative and weekly prepared or researched applications coming in all the time. So let me tell you, this isn't typical, but just to illustrate the point. So I've got 10 applications. The first 7 are asking for things we don't do, or the applicant hasn't read the website, so they've sent to us what they sent to Screwfix. We ask for a bespoke application, not a cut and paste and a top and a tail. So I'm down to 3 already, straight away. One has enough resources, but the treasurer is desperately holding on to rainy day money when it's raining. So that's declined. That leaves me with 2. We will come and visit, an in-person visit. If you've been funded, you'll know that that's happened. And out of those 2 visits, we will probably fund 1. So from 600 applications a year, we make about 80 grants. And the reduction in number is quite simply what I call, Mail Merge Friday, where every funder goes, oh, we haven't tried Rank recently, we'll just chuck in. In fact, sometimes I get applications where the fundraiser hasn't typed out the name of the previous envelope, and so on. That is the biggest challenge. And of course, we are duty bound, as every good funder is, to read and scrutinize every application carefully. But we don't do water wells in India. We don't build schools in Zambia. And it's that type of label for the first 7 out of 10. So all I'd say, generally speaking, is to read the website, not once, but twice. We put on our page, our homepage, how to apply for grant, that we're approachable. Please ring us. For every 30 applications, I probably get 2 phone calls. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Sarah, shall I add?
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
Basically, exactly the same. A high number of applications and the same tension between. We end up funding about 15%, somewhere between 15 to 20% of those people who apply. And I personally find that a real grapple, and that means there's a lot of projects and people we don't fund. There's some people on this call who were able to still put forward good applications, but we weren't able to fund. And that's hard, but equally, I would echo, when I first met John, Dr. John Higgs, he said to me, people need to read the website. And I thought, of course people will read the website. And now I see it from the other side, like with John, of the last round, we had 60 applications, probably almost half of those, it wasn't clear how they were making Jesus known, and it wasn't clear that they were working in area of deprivation in the UK. Now you may go, but why would somebody apply? And often I think people go, maybe there's hope. I know you say you don't do buildings grant, but this is a cracking building. I know you don't currently now fund outside of the UK, but actually this is a really good project. Robin Peake, he's not here. Case in point, Robin who will watch this recording later is still convinced that one day we will fund Bible translation. I think Bible translation is amazing and great, but doesn't align with what the current focus of the trust is. And so again, high volumes, therefore, you know, I disappoint more people than we please in any funding round. And knowing that, you know, every trust is suffering from the same, I think that's a real issue, because it also then, you know, consumes all sorts of time at your end putting in applications for funding. That doesn't happen.
Yeah, and I think this ties in as fundraisers. Obviously, you say sometimes people haven't read the website. I think because I think, Grant, as you mentioned before, we're seeing other funders closing, pausing, changing their strategies.
Yeah.
There is a lot of pressure on fundraisers as well to find someone that will fund the work. Now, that obviously, as you say, is a waste of time for everyone if you haven't read the website and haven't done the application, especially considering as fundraisers we have, you know, however many applications to do that are very different for each trust.
Yeah.
So I think it's, as you say, it's important for us all to really read those criteria, make sure we match, and that saves everyone's time and energy.
Sarah, can I just pick up a question from Claire in the chat about about feedback? Our trustees have a long-standing policy of not giving feedback because it's not going to change their decision. But what we do is, for example, if there's a weak application but we see potential, we'll send it back with an example of a recently funded application. Or I'll go and visit, or I'll go and ring people. If your application comes in and you've followed the trustees' expectations on the website and you're a close fit and you're still not funded, that is simply because we don't have £6 million a year to give out. We've only got 3. And we do say that on the website. There are some, as Grant alluded to, some excellent applications that come in, but we can't fund everything. And I know it's disappointing for fundraisers to say, well, we're not getting any feedback. I do give feedback in the sense that I would say the funding community will decline to support your application if you've ignored and chosen not to follow the guidance. And for me, that's the biggest reason why applications are declined.
And we have a long-standing tradition, this is great fun, of giving feedback, albeit it is only really 2 or 3 lines of feedback, but we'll often happily give more if somebody wants to come back and understand more. What is hard on that though, how sustainable that is longer term with rising number of applications is hard, but I think we will always continue to do that. And if we need to control rising application numbers, we will do exactly what we're doing. We spend a lot of time analysing who we don't fund and why we don't fund, and going, what lessons can we learn from that, and how do we need to clarify even more on the website examples of what we do and don't fund.
Yeah, thank you both. I think it's really interesting as a fundraiser for us to understand how you make those decisions, but also where, as you said, there simply isn't enough money. It's helpful for us to know, well, why did that charity just, what was in their application that just sort of, for want of a better word, beat our application? And we do find it, I can see people in the chat saying fundraisers find it, grant writers find it really helpful to have that feedback. And of course, we understand that there's not an unlimited pot of money. At least I say we understand, speaking for myself. And we understand as well that funders have some really hard decisions, especially when you're getting that level of that many applications, and you have to say no to people. We appreciate it's a tough decision and it's difficult for everyone. So yeah, but it's great to hear of the different sort of attitudes to feedback as well, and the responses.
And Sarah, it's worth saying we've got lots of examples of where we have given feedback and then people have applied again. And I can see faces on this call which link in with that as well. So yeah, and what John does do on his website, which we are likely to do soon, is put some values of how much funding we are giving out, and we'll be looking at, in our case, putting some headlines in terms of how many applications we've received, so people can also take a bit of an informed view, because we are a bit of a, you may get, as with John, relatively large amounts of funding. It therefore means we're intentionally not able to support everybody with small, and how we can help people make an informed call on that. Our challenge has been, because it's taken 3 years to get to a point of getting everybody onto the bus, it's only now that we're actually getting to a point where we've got meaningful numbers in which to share. And you can see there's some comments in chat where some people have picked up, but hang on, you're still supporting non-UK. And that's because we fund people for 3 years and we're accounting for grant expenditure when it's going out. Some of that is still just coming out at the tail end in the annual report, and where we've got this focus now, which is likely to remain our focus for good, only now are we at the point when we've got data and numbers which can actually help people when it comes to weighing up whether to apply or not.
Brilliant, thank you. I know we have had another question in the chat, but I'm going to continue with the questions we've had in prior first of all, and then we'll move back onto the chat questions afterwards. So the next question I have is, if a trust does not accept unsolicited applications, how best is it to connect with the trust to make sure a charity is on their radar, especially for small charities who may not be well known? Now, I know for both of you, you obviously have very clear application processes, but have you got any guidance for anyone who wants to approach a trust that doesn't have that kind of guidance or is invitation only?
We accept unsolicited applications, although we do say a lot of our work is driven by the initiatives of the trustees. Frankly, if a trust says we don't accept unsolicited applications, that's where you should stop. I don't think there's anything to be gained from your time or the person taking the call. You're not going to change their policy. It's as simple as that. So I would advise you to move on and look for a charity that doesn't have that statement on their website.
Okay, thanks, John. Grant?
Yeah, this is where I think you've all got incredibly tough jobs, how you engage with that. And actually, Charlie, your comment in chat on how does prior relationship play? Actually, when we know somebody or somebody tries to side up with us, actually that gives us less chance of funding somebody, because we take, we believe in our application process and how we assess in the context of that. Equally, I can't tell you that going elsewhere, that's the right process to follow. In our context, actually somebody trying to increase their chance by trying to befriend or follow somebody on LinkedIn or meeting somebody at an event or saying, can I have a call? Robin Peake once told me of a story he had when he applied to John Higgs, and in an early era of his life, he phoned up John Higgs. John, I don't know if you remember this, but Robin told me he proudly phoned up John Higgs to ask a question, because he knew he needed to ask a question to get on John Higgs's radar. And John Higgs just pointed him back to what it says on a website. And I think it's really hard, because, a seasoned fundraiser will also go, there are other funders where that is the right thing to do. In our case, it's not. Actually, if I know somebody, they actually get put through their paces probably slightly harder than a completely out of the blue context. But yeah, I'm afraid I don't have an answer.
No, that's great. Thank you both. That's really interesting to to hear, because often on sort of training as fundraisers, we're told, to pick up the phone. Obviously, in John's case, that's what we should be doing. But with people who are invite only, or to get on their radar, we're supposed to be doing these things, but actually to hear it might be counterproductive is interesting.
Just to be clear, Claire is my grants administrator. She's the person who anybody applying to Lauderdale will hear from. We have a phone number on a website which Claire will answer, because we want to be there to answer a question if somebody has got something or is going, hang on, I don't know how to answer that. But again, that's not a prerequisite to getting funding. And it's worth saying, we're not even looking for perfect application forms. We just need to know enough on, are you doing the type of project we want to fund? If so, we will get on a call. Some of our best projects we've supported have actually pretty poor application forms sometimes, but often we get on a call, we find out some more information, and we go from there.
Brilliant. Thank you. It's good to know both of you at your trusts are really open and responsive. So that's great. Moving on to the next question. This one is in two parts, so bear with me. Sometimes a large-scale project, such as a capital appeal or exceptional emergency need, arises. Given that trusts increasingly restrict applications and available funding, how would you advise fundraisers to best approach trusts, firstly, when they already have ongoing grants from the trust but now seek additional support for a new and exceptional project? And secondly, they have no existing relationship with the trust but face a substantial new and exceptional funding need, which I think probably ties in to our last question a little bit. Do you want me to pop that in the chat?
That might be helpful.
Yeah, it's quite a wordy question, so bear with me and I'll pop it into the chat. So yeah. So it's essentially if a charity has an emergency need and they've already got a relationship with you as a funder, how should they approach you? And if they have no relationship with you already, but they're seeking emergency funding, is that something you consider?
So, John, I'll go first, and I can pick up Sarah's kind of comment question as well at the same time, Sarah Bennington. Basically, we don't respond to one-off requests, whether it's a large-scale kind of capital project or exceptional emergency, because really we want to support as many projects as we possibly can that align with what we have said we are set out to do. And just on that, sorry, I'm going off course slightly. Please don't think there are all these wonderful applications where we're going, because of funding, we're only going to fund these and just park these, even though everything else is good. Even when something doesn't get funding, I can't think of a single time where we've actually gone back to somebody and not been able to give at least some feedback or what may have just made the difference, even if it is just actually the other projects that got funding were clearer on X or Y. So it's not the case of, oh, actually, we just didn't have enough money and everybody else got supported. What ends up happening sometimes, and the most recent round we had was a case of we just weren't able to fund the chosen ones with quite the same amount, high level of gifting as we've done in some past round. We supported a greater number, slightly less, but still a meaningful amount. Yeah, in our context, no. That said, in Lewin Trust, which is the one slightly less faith-based, 0 to 5s, where we are supporting a lot of non-UK projects, we are currently exploring a way to give one-off emergency help to existing project partners. So say if we're funding somebody for 3 years, they may be, I don't know, running a refugee camp somewhere, a preschool in a refugee camp. Actually, how could we be more nimble and agile to those causes if, say, an earthquake or something hit? Slightly different context. Again, in Lauderdale, in the UK, we've gone, no, actually, we just want to support the greatest number of direct applications.
Okay, great. Thanks, Grant. And John, if I can come to you.
I may have mentioned at the beginning, we're not a repeat or ongoing funder. So every year, every penny of what we have available goes to churches and charities we've never met before. That is stated on the website. It's stated in the covering letter that acknowledges an application. And when I go and visit, I say it out loud as well. So, you know, if everybody's tuned in, there's no doubt that we don't come back a second time. So if you are in receiving current funding and you've got an additional need, you know, it's not going to be considered by us. We also don't do emergencies. Most emergencies, to be honest, are tsunamis, natural disasters overseas. However, saying that, during COVID, the trust made a grant of 250,000 to the Trussell Trust to enable emergency restocking of food banks that run out of money. So occasionally that there are emergencies of that nature. That's just a recent example in our parish of the UK and Ireland, but generally speaking, most of the overseas at the moment, like Myanmar and Sudan, you know, we're not in a position to consider that.
Yeah, that's great.
And Sarah, just on the back of that, just to add, I like being different from John. We do accept repeat applications. After we can't fund somebody, we say you can't apply again for the same or similar project for the next 12 months, just to be fair to new applicants coming in, but we will allow somebody to apply again. Equally, if it's a slightly larger organisation, often they're able to apply for a different project. And where that's come from, we started off on a similar page as John, actually going, we only want to fund somebody once, be kind of startup, catalytic, all those lovely, wonderful buzzwords. But because we're funding often projects in areas of deprivation, the more successful mission-wise they become, actually the less financially sustainable they become. Now, we are walking a fine line there, though, on we don't want somebody to become exclusively dependent upon our funding, but there will be occasions where actually we will choose to support somebody again. And we've got examples of that, where we've funded somebody for 3 years and have now funded them again.
Yeah, brilliant. And thank you. Yeah, that's a great reminder about financial sustainability as well as charities, and not putting all your eggs in one basket, so to speak. And yeah, John, I was thinking about COVID as well, so that's really great to hear of the grant you gave to the Trussell Trust, which I'm sure made a huge impact. So thank you both for that. Moving on to the next question. Are either of your trusts planning to review your strategy in the coming months? And if so, how would you communicate that to fundraisers so that they can plan in advance?
John, I'm happy to, or you can.
No, we're not.
Excellent. Short and sweet. Perfect. Thanks, John. That's brilliant.
Every year we have what we call annual review meeting, where we do look at what we have funded, but also importantly what we haven't funded, and we use that to take stock on, do we need to refine our focus, or for example, do we want to respond to other needs if suddenly we're found we've fully penetrated the market, as it were. We're currently saying our current focus is areas of deprivation in the UK. I can't completely predict what trustees are going to do in December, which is our next review meeting, but I think it is highly unlikely we're going to change that, in which case, because of there being so much uncertainty in the market on our funders about to stop or change, we are likely actually to remove the word current, so that we're not creating this false sense of, are they about to change what they're doing. So unless application numbers suddenly dried up, or unless we decided actually we weren't able to make an impact with our funding, I think it's likely we will continue with that focus for the foreseeable.
Thank you. That's wonderful, and I know as fundraisers that's brilliant for us, because there's nothing worse than when you've spent time preparing an application and then suddenly a trust closes, and you've wasted your time, and yeah, it's very frustrating for fundraisers. So thank you both for being open and transparent about that. I can see we have got some questions in the chat. I will just quickly ask one of these, as it's directed at John and the Joseph Rank Trust. John, what's the rationale for only accepting hard copies of applications by post for your trust, please?
Yeah, very old-fashioned, but good point, Hannah. Happy to answer that. I'm looking at the web page applying for grants, and it says in red the answer you're looking for. Applications must be sent in hard copy, brackets not by email, as we're not resourced to print them for you. I'm the full-time workforce, 600 applications a year. Some accounts run to 50 or 60 pages. I'll never leave the office. I'll never leave the office. We don't have an application form. So the ingredients is a covering letter, 2 sides of A4, the management accounts, or the project account if it's capital, and your latest set of audited accounts. That's all we ask for, okay? And we think that's quite a reasonable ask. But if I sat here printing them all out for you, I wouldn't be able to come out and see you, kick the tires, meet the beneficiaries, and do what I consider, and the trustees consider, a very important part of the process, is to get to know the mission that you're trying to achieve. I visit 200 churches and charities a year, and I've done that for 18 years. And I think most people love a visit. They love to sell the product. They love to show you what they're doing for the beneficiaries, whether it be in a prison, whether it be in a homeless unit, whether it be in a food bank, whatever it is. So I'm afraid, Hannah, you know, we're going to continue with our strategy until the trustees can afford to employ someone to print off applications all day.
Great, thanks, John. And I think it's similar for all of us. We're all, you know, we have the resources that we have, don't we? And we have to work within those limitations. And speaking for myself, I do love it when trusts come and visit Bible Society. So yes, I'm sure all those churches and charities you visit, John, also appreciate that, as you said. I've got a question now, which is specifically for Grant and the Lauderdale Trust. So I really like how you work in meaningful relationships with churches and charities. Could you explain a bit more what this looks like and why you chose to run your trust like this?
Yeah, I think I touched on this right at the start because we didn't know any other way to do it. We literally started on a bit of a blank page and went, right, we're about making Jesus known in areas of deprivation. Therefore, that often involves employing people. I can pick up actually one of the Claire McIntosh's question about how much to ask for. We're willing to fund up to 50% of project costs, and therefore, if that could well be a youth worker in a church in an area of deprivation, a pastor in a church, or a regional organisation doing mission work, often a combination of projects doing social action through both word and deed. Many of those require a staff member. Many of those, even with getting other funding on top, require a significant amount of funding to pull that project off. In some cases, the project could well be the entire running costs of an organisation because they're relatively small. And therefore, we just went, hang on, if we're to enable something, it needs to be a meaningful enough amount. So we started off on the, therefore, what is a meaningful amount without creating too much dependency upon us as a funder? We therefore came up with between 10 to 50k a year, and for up to 3 years worth of funding. Now, I talked about us being a toddler learning to walk. In our early days, we gave out some funding larger than that, and we learned actually that's not always helpful for the organisation. And we heard that back from actually projects we've supported, going, we never expected to get that amount of money. You actually caused us issues by needing to actually spend it to be able to report. So the 10 to 50 is trying to get that mid spot between enabling you to make an impact, i.e. get on and employ somebody, but also still enable enough other funding to be raised. Meaningful relationship, multi-year funding. Only after being imposed did I come across stuff like IVAR, and I found other reports that said, you know, fundraisers want multi-year funding. We only found out about that after we'd started doing it, as it were. Meaningful relationship, we like to keep in touch with projects every 6 months. Items for prayer, our trustees meet every month to pray for projects, but that also triggers enough of an update in order to release the next tranche of funding. Now, we always go into that wanting to release money, but we'll also, I can't quite keep up with John, but we are passionate about going to visit every project at the halfway point, and we deliberately do it at the halfway point because it stops another conversation about another application, but it's also given them enough chance to get on and do something. And that is a real joy when we just go and listen and hear and see. And that's not to inspect, that's just to go, actually, as a trust, are we scratching where there's an itch in terms of focus?
Great, thank you. Great. So speaking about IVAR, we do have a question here which says, can you let us know how you work with bodies such as IVAR or the ACF, the Association of Charitable Foundations? How do you collaborate with other trusts?
Okay, that's an easy one, folks. Go to the website christianfundersforum.org if you don't know it already. The forum has been has existed since 2014. It started with 4 members. We have over 55 now. And you've got, not all the members have a website, but you've got a good 2/3 of us with a website on that address I gave you. We are in touch with the ACF Collaborative Hub. Members of the forum attend the Scottish grant makers and the Welsh funders. So I think there is a lot more joined up thinking, not only between the Christian funders today. Last week we were on retreat and we spent about 30 hours in each other's pockets, and there were 22 trusts represented. We meet every term. We have an awards event. We have a weekly bulletin. And talking of the weekly bulletin, here is an offering for you, if I can hold this up, which is an excellent report from your friends called Apollo Fundraising, which I spotted and circulated to all our members. If you haven't read this, I think I can just put it close. What is going on with grant making in 2025? And this is from a fundraiser. And it's an excellent report. You just got to Google it. You'll get hold of it pretty easy. Apollo Fundraising. So I think the interaction between Christian funders, is emails and WhatsApps all the time now. We're not out on a limb as we used to be before 2014.
And John, because I do believe in printing things, you'll be pleased to know I have printed that same report. In addition to that, everything John said, we do use IVAR. Lewin Trust is also a member of ACF. I'm tight, I won't pay for it for both trusts, but I'll pay for it for one. And from that, we do use some of their wider research and reporting to help the trustees in our annual review meeting, alongside what we're funding and what we're not funding and what we're hearing from project visits. We are using some of the wider research reports to go, are we getting our funding right based on what the sector is saying? We're not subject matter experts. Our trustees aren't kind of funding experts. And so we have used some of the IVAR stuff and ACF to go, are we getting it right on, we don't force our funding to be treated as restricted funding. We do want it to be used on a project, but we don't force somebody to account for it in a particular way. We do give multi-year. There is flex over the time of the project if things haven't quite worked out what they've done. And we've been using the IVAR stuff to go, where are we at on that and what could we do to improve?
Brilliant, thank you.
The other thing I'd say is a lot of Christian Funders Forum members are standardising their data through 360 giving. So this trust, we've been doing it since 2017, and a lot of trusts are encouraged to do that because it's really a really simple process.
Yeah, and if anybody has read our annual report, you may actually go, why aren't we giving detailed lists of exactly every project we support? And partly, and you can see this on our website as well, we're not listing every case study of everybody we support, not because we're not trying to be transparent with data. We're about to get there with how much we're awarding and what response rates are. It's because we actually don't want the story to be about us. When any funder, when any fundraiser wants to make me happy by putting our name on the door or something, that brings me out in a cold sweat, because we want to be, when we first started, if we could have got away without having a website, without being there, we just want to be a quiet enabler of work. Now, clearly, you need to have a website in our context if we want to have an open door. But we're also trying to walk that line between, we want to be transparent, we want to be really clear, but also we do just want to be a quiet enabler of the work you guys and others are doing on the ground, rather than shouting about us.
Brilliant, thank you. And yeah, I would say, anyone who hasn't looked at 360 Giving, the data there is really great, and I use it frequently to see whether a trust might consider funding something similar to us. So that's really helpful. I think in terms of time, we've just got a couple of minutes for questions in the chat. I think we've answered most of them as we've gone along. I do have one specifically here for you, John.
Sure.
So It says Dr. John Higgs once responded to an application with the following: a major part of the work of this trust is supporting initiatives identified by the trustees. As a result, a substantial part of the anticipated income is already committed, and the trustees are seldom able to make grants in response to unsolicited appeals. Can Dr. John please expand on this response?
Well, thank you, Mark, for the question. You've given quite an edited part of my email to you the 16th of February 2024, which I'm looking at. So I'd ask you to look at the rest of the email and please give us a ring outside of this call, and I'm happy to unpack it. Generally speaking, what we try to do in any message of acknowledgement or in the first place is not to raise people's expectations. I think that's something we don't want to do, that just because you've applied and we're beginning to process it, you know, you've got a guaranteed outcome. Mark, your text that you've lifted from my email of the 16th of February 24 went on to say, as far as your own appeal is concerned, the funding request cannot be supported by the trust, so I'm unable to be assistance to you. And then I think we gave you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 further links which would help you source other areas of funding. And we ended it by saying, we wish you well in securing the funds you need. So, you know, when we say no to people, we try to help them, we try to guide them perhaps to other avenues. I don't have the application in front of me because it's obviously been destroyed, but I'm more than happy if you want to ring in any time to have another discussion.
Thank you, John. That's brilliant. And yeah.
Sarah, shall I quickly pick up Charlie's question?
Yes, please. I think this is going to be the last question we have time for.
Just one thing I was really keen to say, and it picks up on this, is we end up, the deciding factor often between those right at the end on all great projects, all making Jesus known, all in areas of declaration, is often, is there a funding need? Now, you as fundraisers, you know, wouldn't be applying if there wasn't a funding need, but often, time and time again, when we go digging, you know, the first place I go, I don't actually read the application form as our first place. I go and read the most recent annual report, look at the website and get a picture of an organisation before I then read the application form. And often the funding picture we see, there can be brilliant organisations doing amazing work, but often we go, actually, you've got so much reserves compared to some of the other organisations who have applied. On this occasion, we don't see the need for funding. Now, what is the optimum level of reserves? Porridge. What one funder wants will be different from the next funder. But for us, if somebody can, you know, it's not about whether it's 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. That's not for us the issue. If somebody can say we need 9 months because of X or Y, COVID has taught us 3 months of reserves won't get you far. It's more where we end up not funding is when somebody has well in excess of 12 to 18 months, and not so much for the professional fundraisers amongst you, but for local church context, what is often really sad, somebody puts in an application form because the treasurer or somebody has said, well, you can't employ this youth worker until you get some funding. Actually, we go and read the church accounts and go, you could employ him for the next 5 years before you've even tapped into funds. And that's not even taking into account restricted pots of money you've got. So the one thing I would just say, you know, even if you're not a finance person, making sure the picture in your accounts supports your application is often what gets that application over the final line or not.
I know we're short of time, but I think the key ingredient when I'm scrutinising the accounts is a very clear reserves policy.
Yeah.
Okay. And I know sometimes you would receive a legacy in month 11 and then it inflates your SOFA and your balance sheet, but just put it in the notes. You know, I don't think it's for a funder to say, we're not happy that you have got 6 months operational reserves. You know, that's a matter for your trustees. But if you've got unrestricted, undesignated funds that appear in the SOFA and the balance sheet that you haven't clearly explained, which looks like cash that you can use, you need to go back to the author of the accounts, which is not just a statutory obligation to the charity commissions that we serve under, it's also a marketing document. So, you know, it's your front of house, it's your shop window. So I'm looking for a reserves policy that actually underwrites the level of unrestricted funds in the SOFA and the balance sheet. But I don't take a view that you shouldn't hold X or you shouldn't hold Y. But on the other hand, if you've clearly got money for a rainy day and it's raining, why are you applying to us?
And if it has rained since that last annual report, which we're reading, and you have had to use it, just give us a statement which says, you know, this is how things have moved on since then. This is a forecast for this year. This is where we're at now. Because again, if that reflects a very different picture to what it is now, we spend most of our time ending up having to ask for forecast for the current year, if actually what we've looked at doesn't help you, as it were.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you both. Yeah, really useful. I always include a statement on reserves as well. Yeah, so that's great to hear. Naomi, I'm going to hand back to you briefly before we close in prayer. So thank you, Grant and John, for all of your responses. Very appreciated. Over to you, Naomi.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you on behalf of FICO to all of you for a really, really interesting talk. We could have listened for a lot longer, and it's just lovely to see some of the people behind the organisations and the trusts. And speaking for myself, I know the other day when I was doing some trust research, at the end of the day, I was just so grateful to all of those trusts for the work that they do in supporting Christian ministry. So thank you. So yeah, I'm going to hand back now to Sarah to close in prayer.
Thanks, Naomi. Heavenly Father, thank you for all that has been shared today. I want to thank you for John and for Grant, for their trusts, for all funders in the Christian Funders Forum and beyond who help with Christian ministry. We are very grateful for their support and to hear things from their point of view as funders as well. I also ask for your blessing on all the fundraisers in this call, all of the organisations that are represented here, and the people and voices that they represent as well. May you be with us through any difficult times that are ahead. May you bless us all, and may we all work together as fruitfully and efficiently as possible for your glory. And thank you for the work of FICO and all they do to support Christian fundraisers. Amen.
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 Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you.